Okay, let's jump in. So cool. Thank you, Corey. This is Stocking Your Home Bar, a minimalist tiki and beyond. So this is a presentation I put together to do at various tiki festivals here. I've kind of stripped it down for what we're going to do here, to focus on the key points and open up lots of times for questions. So jump in if you got something germane to the topic at that exact moment. I'll trust Will to interrupt me if need be. But
I'm
there'll be
looking
plenty of
out for
time.
germane topics.
Yeah, exactly. And but yeah, if we have lots of time at the end, hopefully. So this should be good. So okay, so what is minimalist tiki? And Will, if you want, make my slides full screen or this.
All right, I can do that.
Yeah. This- Cool. Okay. So what is minimalist tiki? um, excuse me. So back in the day, I don't know, circa 2008, 2009, I was starting to really get into tiki, and like many people, it was like, what do I need? What are like, I hear about this rum and that rum, and then something calls for Demerara rum, and I don't see that in my state liquor store. And so I was just sort of ad hoc, trying to mix drinks, and following recipes, but didn't really have any sort of methodical approach to it. I didn't really understand the how and why of it. Um, and tiki of all the categories is particularly overwhelming. If you're like, well, I'm going to go study in the room for a while. It's like, okay, you got a 3 ingredient recipe. You have a basic pattern. It's not that hard to understand, but tiki, it's hard to can be hard to wrap your head around. There's just so much going on. There's all these exotic ingredients, all these syrups and liqueurs you may not have in your house. They've always got these amazing vessels. The tiki bar. Go to a tiki bar and the drinks you see come in these exotic vessels. These crazy garnishes, and you're like, can I do this at home? I want to do this. I want to do these, but I don't even have all the stuff. Like, what do I need to do? And so, the more I played around with this, the more I sort of set my mind to, like, let's break this down to the frameworks. Let's understand things at the structural level and start treating them like Lego blocks. And you have the long ones and the short ones and the ones with the wheel. Let's understand at that level, and then build it back up. And so I came up with sort of two goals for this thought process I had at the time, and something which eventually became the book. The first goal being, let's focus on the classics of the golden era, the ones that the drinks we all know and love, or we read about all the time: the Mai Tai, the Jet Pilot, the Zombie, the Three Dots and a Dash, Navy Grog. Like, let's focus on those. And there are many great modern tiki recipes, with exotic ingredients, but like, let's focus on the classics. Like, let's figure out, how do we quickly get up to speed on the classics. And so I defined the era between 1934, when tiki started, and about 1970, when everything went to hell, and sort of tiki, died a slow, lingering, almost death for many years until the revival. Let's focus on that golden era of tiki recipes. And then the second goal was to look at the ingredients and break them down into categories, like understandable categories, and sort of eliminate as much as possible these sort of like name brand specific issues. So a rum in a recipe might say Bacardi Silver, or Lemon Heart 151, and you say, well, I don't have those. Like, yeah, but you might have something like that. You just, your recipe needs to give you guidance. It's like, you need a rum like this, and maybe here's an example of that. But basically, to break down the need for have 6 different types of orange liqueur just to make 6 different recipes. Like let's find a commonality. So that was my goal, is to be able to like focus on a core set of recipes, and then start with give you concrete guidance on what you buy on a budget. So next slide. The end result of all this is, of course, my book. so that's a small plug here. It's Minimalist Tiki. It's only available at minimalisttiki.com. My wife and I self-published it. You can see her name down there, here at the bottom near mine, Matt Pietrek and Carrie Smith. That's my wife, and she's a much better writer than I, and a much better illustrator, and a much better project manager than I am. But between the two of us, we put this book together. We self-published it. We did literally everything ourselves except for taking some photographs and actually printing the book. So we self-published it. We don't sell it on Amazon or in bookstores because they take the vast majority of the money. We wanted to deliver a top quality book to people and actually make a little money ourselves so that we can keep doing this. So minimalisttiki.com is where you can get the book. Next slide. Okay, so the essence of tiki, and I will sometimes call these cocktail patterns, but the essence of tiki is oftentimes boiled down to is Barbadian nursery rhyme, which is 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, 4 of weak. At some point, the longer you do tiki recipes, the more it's sort of like it's just ingrained in your head. Now, it doesn't mean you have to always follow that particular pattern, but it gives you this core ethos. Like any tiki recipe is going to have something sour, something sweet, and something strong. And the weak we'll talk about in a bit. But basically, tiki drinks are essentially sours, if you will, exotic sours. I like to think of them as maybe daiquiris, rum, lime, and sugar, turned up to 11 with more exotic spices, more exotic juices, more fruit liqueurs, or whatever the case may be. They all at some point come down to that basic pattern. So next slide. So in terms of identifying what you might want to buy for your home bar, what you should start with, rather than just the following the age-old advice of, well, like, find a recipe you like and then go buy everything for that, and then find the next recipe you like and then go buy everything for that. I said, let's focus on building your ingredient set up from a known set of recipes. And so I picked 30 classic recipes, which are listed here. And you might disagree with them. I don't think anybody is going to disagree that a Mai Tai should be on this list, or that a Navy grog shouldn't be on this list. You might quibble with, the Donga Punch shouldn't be on there, and some other recipes should be on there. But the idea here is to take a big enough representative sample and then look at these recipes, look at them collectively, like do some really simple math. So now let's go to the next slide. I appreciate this might be a little hard to read, and you're not necessarily supposed to read this here, but this is the chart that in the book that everybody, the light bulb goes on over their head and they say, oh, now I see what you're talking about. So on the left-hand side are each of those 30 recipes from the previous slide. So left-hand side is recipes. And then along the top, the rows here, I'm sorry, the columns, sorry. The columns here are specific ingredients. So basically, if a given ingredient appears in any one of those 30 recipes, there's a column for it here. But you'll also notice, and if you look closely, they're sort of color coded. And so the first four columns there are five columns. Yeah, first 5 columns or so are color coded. And those are all citrus juices. The lemons, limes, orange, grapefruit, pineapple, those are citrus juices. The next column is zoom in there. I can read. What is the next column? Zoom in a second. Well, I can't read it myself. Simple syrup. Oh, yeah, syrup. Yes. Yeah. So the next column are what I call syrups or sweeteners. So simple syrup, orgeat, passion fruit, grenadine, blah 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 blah. There's columns after that. The black dots, well, those are rums, and you'll notice that each rum is rather than saying, you know, Bacardi, Silver, or Demerara rum or Barbados rum. Excuse me. They're basically overarching categories that you know any number of rums could fit in that category. So if you're familiar with the Smuggler's Cove book and the Smuggler's Cove categorizations, they're somewhat like that. They're not quite so technically specific, but they're somewhat like that. The idea is that like uh, any rum that fits well within this category should probably work in that recipe. So we have things like aged Jamaican rums, lightly aged and filtered rums, what many people like to call white rums. I don't like that term. Moderately aged rums, aged Demerara rums, and it called out Demerara specifically because that has a specific flavor profile. Same with the Jamaican rums; those have a unique flavor profile. But I haven't pulled out a lot of the other styles of rum or other sort of aged rums. Those all fit within the moderately aged rum category, and we'll come back to these in a bit. Anyhow, so you got rums there in the rum column, and then a little bit more to the right with the black, with the white center circles, are different kinds of bitters and liqueurs. So these are ingredients that have alcohol in them and tend to put in a strong flavor. They're basically alcohol extractions. So you have things like Angostura bitters, falernum, Pernod, curacao, orange liqueur, whatever you want to call it, pimento dram, coffee liqueur. And then the column a little bit to the right of that, sort of the purple with the white center, these are other base spirits you use, ones that are not rums. So brandy, gin, bourbon, tequila, blah, blah, blah. So zoom back out, Will. Hey, Will.
Is that zoomed out for you, Matt?
No. Zoom out. I want to see the whole chart now.
It should be zoomed out. There may be a slight lag on your video side.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's still zoomed in on mine. Okay, I'll presume it's zoomed out. So then what you'll notice there is that each of those, if you look at each column there, you'll see, for example, a lot of black dots. And you'll see, but if you look at there's a whole bunch of black dots underneath Jamaican rum. That means, okay, there we go. Now we're full. There we go. Excellent. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. So look sort of in the middle there. You see the row with all the black dots. That's Jamaican rum. Jamaican rum. You can see visually from looking at that. A lot of recipes call for Jamaican rums. If you look over on towards the far left there, the first column, that's not a recipe name, is lime juice. Gee, there's a lot of drinks that use lime juice. And so, the idea is it sort of visually tells you like the hot spots, if you will, like focus on the ingredients first that have a lot of columns. So now flip to the next slide. Now I've done the math for you. This is the same idea of that chart, but condensed and sort of like your quick reference card, if you will. So again, you'll see it's broken up by the different sort of categories. I contend that any tiki recipe is composed almost entirely of these categories, something from each one of these categories or something from most one of these categories. So what you'll see, for example, in citrus, see lime juice is used in 20 out of 30 recipes. Your home bar should pretty much always be stocked with lime juice, fresh limes. Orange juice is the second most used tiki ingredient. Funny, I find I use far less orange juice than, in fact, I rarely use orange juice in my tiki recipes, but the classics used a lot. Lemon juice is frequently used, and then pineapple, grapefruit. So start with lime, and then build your list down there. In terms of syrup, 10 out of 30 simple syrup. It's super easy to make. Not literally 1 part sugar, 1 part water. Throw it in a bottle. Shake it around every once in a while. The water will dissolve. The sugar will dissolve. You don't need to heat it or anything like that. It would literally dissolve and make simple syrup. There's no reason to go buy simple syrup. But then other syrups like orgeat, passion fruit, grenadine, things to start with. Start by buying those syrups first. In terms of liqueurs and bitters, Angostura, #1. Not terribly surprising. A lot of tiki recipes have a couple dashes of Angostura bitters. Then beyond that, falernum. Pernod or absinthe is an interesting one, and you know, if you're not really familiar with tiki, you might say, well, why is that? Like, I don't really associate tiki with absinthe. Turns out the Don Beach recipes, the early Don Beach recipes, typically would have like 6 drops of absinthe or 6 drops of Pernod, 6 drops of something anise, sort of his signature. So, you know, you don't need to have a whole bottle of that, you know, just a, little, dasher bottle or a dropper bottle. But next to that, things like orange liqueurs, pimento drams, things like that. Base spirits, probably have a brandy on hand, probably have a gin on hand to make those Saturns. And then, of course, we talked, we'll come back to rums in a bit. So the idea is that this chart here kind of gives you a starting point. These are the most common most common ingredients you're going to find in tiki recipes of that golden era. If you were to redo this chart going forward, like with today's modern recipes, you might bring more ingredients into it. For example, you might see, for example, more use of tequila, more use of mezcal. You'll notice that Scotch whiskey is not in that list. But again, we're focusing on the golden era. Master that first, and then we can start working on mastering modern era classics. Okay, next slide. There we go. Okay, so now let's bring it back to our nursery rhyme. The one of sour. Typically, tiki recipes get their sour from their citrus component. The big ones being limes, lemons, grapefruit. These are the core. I always have limes and lemons on hand. I buy them in 5-pound bags at Costco. I throw them in a Ziploc bag, like a gallon Ziploc bag, keep them in the refrigerator. They last a pretty long time before they start to go bad. So there's really no reason you can't keep fresh lemons and limes on hand all the time. Grapefruit I try to keep on hand, in a pinch. Sometimes buy like a half gallon of grapefruit. It'll last a while in the refrigerator. If you can get white grapefruit, if you're lucky enough to be like in Florida or maybe parts of Southern California or Texas where they have white grapefruit, buy that. That's the good stuff. That's what the original tiki recipes were primarily using, was a white, very tart grapefruit, and not the sort of sweeter ruby red grapefruit that we have now. Anyhow, one of sour. Your sour comes from your citrus. Next slide. 2 of sweet. You can also get some of your sweet in your recipe from citrus as well. Orange juice and pineapple juice being the predominant citrus notes there. Next slide. Another way you get sweet is via syrups. I mentioned simple syrup is the most dominant one. Super easy. Please don't buy simple syrup. Just make it. Or if you can even make demerara syrup, buy a nice demerara sugar, which tends to have a little bigger crystals and tends to have a little of the molasses still on it from sugarcane processing. That's all demerara syrup is a simple syrup made with demerara sugar, so it's has a little more flavor to it. You can pretty much, for the most part, use simple syrup or demerara syrup interchangeably. They're just basic sugar syrups. All the other syrups are really essentially just flavored sugar and water. They are a liquid made with some sort of juice or some sort of flavor combined with water or the juice and sugar. It's really just a sweet liquid. Orgeat is originally a French syrup made from almonds and sometimes other ingredients, but it's one of those canonical ingredients. You can't make a Mai Tai without orgeat. It doesn't work. It's a staple tiki ingredient, and any tiki bar, any home tiki bar should have orgeat. I would make the same case for passion fruit. Unless you happen to hate passion fruit also essential. Grenadine, pretty high on this list. I'm a little surprised by that. I don't use as much grenadine in the recipes I make as this chart here would indicate, but You know, they're a good grenadine. You can make your own grenadine. It's really just I'm trying pomegranate.
Pomegranate.
Yes, thank you. Pomegranate is really just pomegranate juice and sugar. There's a recipe in Minimalist Tiki for how to make it. Uh, Same as honey mix, same idea as simple syrup, just 1 part honey, 1 part water. Maybe heat the water first, but put the honey and the water together in a jar or a bottle. Let it mix for a while, and you got honey mix. The reason they do honey mix rather than just honey is if you put honey directly into a cocktail alongside all the ice and other things, it would tend to freeze up and could get clumpy or not really distribute well. By mixing it first with water, you basically ensure that it's not going to, sort of clump together or that it will mix well with the other ingredients. Cinnamon syrup, also super easy to make. Cinnamon syrup is really just simple syrup that you've boiled some cinnamon sticks in. I mean, you can buy it, and there are good sources for buying it, like BG Reynolds, for example, but it's really easy to make at home. Cream of coconut, probably don't want to make at home, but things like Real or Coco Lopez. If you hate coconut, obviously, you don't rush out and buy that. But if you want to make a painkiller or a bunch of a lot of more modern tiki recipes like the Angostura colada, you use cream of coconut. It's a very rich. It's got a lot of fattiness into it. It's a very textured syrup. But yeah, so that's sweets. Some of your sweets can come from citrus, some can come from syrups, and some can come from liqueurs. Sweet liqueurs, things like falernum. The most popular store-bought falernum would be John D. Taylor's, which is made by Foursquare. But also things like what I call the orange liqueurs. You might hear them called curacao, dry curacao, orange shrub, triple sec, Cointreau. I'm drawing a blank on one of them. But all those liqueurs which are heavily flavored from oranges. Pimento dram, which is a Jamaican spiced liqueur, very very strong, very pungent. Some people love it. Mrs. Wong does not. Toffee liqueur, great. And Kahlua is the best known one, but there's other better quality ones, if you will. Creme de cassis, it just happens to appear on this list. It's not. I don't find it used that often, but for the sake of accuracy, creme de cassis is on this list. You can also get from some of these liqueurs. You can also get some of the more bitter notes. They're not quite the sour, but they're some of the more bitter notes. And the dominant ones there being Angostura bitters, Pernod and absinthe. I consider those staples for any starting out tiki bar. Bottle Angostura bitters you can get for $6-8 for a 4-ounce bottle. I go through a lot of Angostura bitters. I buy them in the 16-ounce bottles. You can get them for around, if you're good, nowhere to look, you can get them for around $20 for a 16-ounce bottle of Angostura. It's fun because in the modern tiki recipes, some of them actually use Angostura as your base spirit. Angostura is almost 45% ABV, and so there's some cocktails in our book, actually 4, that use at least half an ounce, and 3 of them use 1.5 ounces of Angostura bitter as their primary spirit. Okay, so we covered liqueur. Next slide.
Sorry about that. They just
sorry.
1 second. I'll get them back up. I think we're on to the rum now, I believe.
Yes, we're on to the rum. And the questions seem to have stopped. I've stunned them or lost them.
Oh no, the questions are coming in. We're already up to.
That's the last one I saw is from Federico, and that's it. He just says very interesting.
Oh, we've got the chat over there, but the question box
cool.
starting to come in. So we're gonna have some good questions to get to here in a little bit. Yeah.
Cool. All right. And slides. 3, 2, 1. Slides.
Do you see that?
No, I just see.
Is there? If you're in the chat, can you let me know if you see the slides?
No.
No.
Nope.
All right. Let me try again.
There we go. Excellent. Okay.
All right.
Now, remember your nursery rhyme. 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong. 3 of strong. Rum. We love rum. Part of one of the most common questions I see on forums and people have is like, I'm confused by rum. Like, what rum do I need? These recipes call for rums I don't see in my grocery store, which is unfortunate. But rum can be a really hard topic to wrap your head around. It's not like bourbon, where they're all pretty much made the same way and kind of taste the same, or like a Scotch whiskey or cognac, where they all kind of made in one spot, taste the same. Rums all over the world, all over the flavor map, from a very lightly aged filtered Puerto Rican rum to the ultra funky Jamaican rum to rum agricole. Rum is hard for people to understand. So we're going to dive into this a little bit now. So next slide.